I spent my last $20 on a turkey for a family who couldn't be bothered to show up, but when they finally screamed my name at graduation, it wasn't out of love, it was because they smelled a billionaire's money. The air inside my small, drafty apartment in Squirrel Hill smelled like sage, melted butter, and desperate hope. It was 10 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning, and I had been awake since 4. The oven was humming, a steady, warm sound that usually comforted me, but today it just felt like a ticking clock. On the counter sat the evidence of my naivety. A 12-pound turkey I had saved up for 2 months to afford, a casserole dish bubbling with homemade mac and cheese, extra sharp cheddar, just the way my dad, Kirk, liked it, and a pumpkin pie made from scratch, because my mother, Donna, always claimed store-bought crust tasted like wet cardboard. I wiped a streak of flour off my forehead and checked my phone. Nothing. I shouldn't have been surprised. I was 23 years old, a senior at Carnegie Mellon University on a full academic scholarship, and I should have known better. But there is a specific kind of stupidity that comes with being the invisible child. You convince yourself that if you just try a little harder, if you just bake the pie a little perfectly, if you just curate the perfect environment, they will finally see you. I grew up just outside Pittsburgh, where the steel mills used to run and where family loyalty was preached louder than the Sunday sermon. But in the house of Donna and Kirk, loyalty was a currency, and I was perpetually bankrupt. All their capital was invested in Brandon. Brandon was 2 years younger, louder, and mediocre in every quantifiable way. But to my parents, he was the sun around which our family orbited. When I brought home straight A's, my mother would hum and say, "That's nice, Marissa. Don't forget to take the trash out." When Brandon managed to pass a remedial math class after failing it twice, they took him to a steakhouse to celebrate his perseverance. The dynamic was etched into our bones. I was the one who would be fine. I was the sturdy one, the low-maintenance one. I didn't need help, so I didn't get love. When I got into CMU, one of the most prestigious schools in the country, my dad asked if I was sure I didn't want to go to the local state school to save gas money. When Brandon flunked out of community college because he stopped showing up to play video games, they bought him a certified pre-owned Ford F-150 to boost his confidence and help him get to job interviews he never scheduled. But this year was supposed to be different. This was my senior year. I was tired of the distance. I had invited them 3 weeks ago. My mom had said, "We'll see," which in my desperate translation meant, yes. I set the table. 4 plates. 4 napkins folded into jagged fans. I even bought sparkling cider. At 10:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wiped my hands on my apron and snatched the device up, expecting a text saying they were on the parkway and hitting traffic. "Donna, we're spending Thanksgiving with Brandon at his girlfriend's parents' house in Ohio. You understand?" I stared at the screen. The pixels seemed to blur. No apology. No, maybe next weekend. No, we're sorry we didn't tell you sooner so you didn't spend 3 days cooking. Just, you understand. I understood, all right. I understood that Brandon's new girlfriend, a girl they had met twice, was more of a priority than the daughter who had spent 4 years studying until her eyes burned, just to make them proud. I understood that they had likely known their plans for days, maybe weeks, and just hadn't bothered to update me because I was an afterthought, a footnote in the story of Brandon. The silence in the apartment changed then. It went from the silence of anticipation to the silence of a tomb. I didn't cry. That was the strangest part. When I was younger, I would have sobbed until my throat was raw. I would have called them, begging, asking what I did wrong. But standing there in the kitchen, surrounded by enough food to feed a squad of linebackers, something inside my chest audibly clicked. It was the sound of a door locking. A heavy, iron door that I knew, with absolute certainty, I would never open again. I walked over to the oven and turned it off. I took the turkey out. It was perfectly golden, the skin crisp and glistening, a masterpiece of wasted effort. I sat down at the head of the small, wobbly table. I didn't put music on. I didn't turn on the TV to watch the parade. I just served myself a plate. Turkey, mac and cheese, green beans, stuffing. I took a bite. It was delicious, and it tasted like ash. "You understand," I whispered to the empty chairs. I ate until I was full. Then, I calmly packed the rest of the food into Tupperware containers. I would be eating turkey sandwiches for the next month, which was fine, because my budget was tight anyway. I washed the dishes. I dried them. I put them away. By noon, the apartment was spotless. The smell of sage lingered, a ghost of a holiday that never happened. I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up my research data. If I wasn't going to be a daughter, I was going to be a success. I poured all the grief, all the resentment, and all the love I had left to give into the glowing screen in front of me. I worked through the afternoon, through the evening, and into the night. I didn't know it then, but that lonely meal was the fuel that would ignite the rest of my life. It was the moment I stopped being their daughter and started being a force of nature. They wanted me to understand? Fine. I understood. And soon, the whole world would understand exactly who Marissa was and exactly what they had thrown away. Have you ever been the one in the family who always gives but never receives? The one expected to just understand, while everyone else gets a free pass? It's a lonely place to be, isn't it? If you've ever felt like the black sheep just for being the responsible one, smash that like button right now. It helps us find more people who know this struggle. And if you're brave enough, comment below with "I'm done understanding" to let me know you're watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell because trust me, the revenge that's coming for this family is something you do not want to miss. Winter in Pittsburgh is less of a season and more of an endurance test. The sky turns the color of dirty dishwater and stays that way until April. It matched my mood perfectly. After the Thanksgiving that wasn't, I threw myself into a routine that left no room for self-pity. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the engineering labs and the stacks of Hunt Library. I worked 2 jobs to cover rent and tuition gaps, pulling espresso shots for ungrateful freshmen at 6 a.m. and cataloging returns at the library until closing. My parents didn't call. Christmas was a text message from my dad. "Hope you're staying warm." Mom sent a card. The card arrived on January 4th. It contained a $20 bill and a picture of Brandon sitting in his new apartment, which they were co-signing for. I put the $20 toward my electric bill and threw the photo in the trash. My existence narrowed down to one thing: my capstone project. I was building a predictive model for supply chain logistics, using AI to identify fractures in global shipping routes before they happened. It was complex, tedious, and absolutely consuming. It was the only thing I had that couldn't walk away from me. In early December, there was a department poster session. I stood by my display for 3 hours, wearing my one good blazer, explaining my algorithms to wandering professors who were mostly looking for the free wine and cheese. I barely noticed the man in the charcoal suit who lingered near my board longer than the others. He didn't ask the usual condescending questions. He just read my data, tapped his chin, and walked away without a word. I forgot about him immediately. I was too busy trying to survive finals on 4 hours of sleep and vending machine crackers. Then came January. The wind off the rivers was cutting through coats like knives. I was halfway through a lecture on thermodynamics when a teaching assistant tapped me on the shoulder. "Department chair wants to see you," she whispered. Immediately, my stomach dropped. I ran through a mental checklist of potential disasters. Did I lose my scholarship? Did I fail a class? Had my tuition check bounced? I walked into Dr. Eris's office bracing for impact. He was a stern man who rarely smiled, and today, he looked particularly intense. He was holding a file with my name on it. "Sit down, Marissa," he said. I sat, gripping the arms of the chair. "Is everything okay, Dr. Eris?" He looked at me over his glasses, an expression on his face I couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger. It was bewilderment. "I just got off the phone with Dr. Zachary Cole," he said. The name hit me like a physical blow. Zachary Cole wasn't just a CMU alum. He was a titan. He was the founder of VectorFlow, a Silicon Valley venture firm that had backed 3 of the biggest tech unicorns in the last decade. He was a billionaire, a legend, and arguably the most powerful name in our industry. "Okay," I managed to squeak out. "He was at the poster session in December, Dr. Eris continued, leaning forward. "He saw your model. He thinks your predictive algorithm is revolutionary. Marissa, he doesn't just want to sponsor the project. He wants to mentor you personally." The room seemed to tilt. "Me?" "Yes, you. And he told me he plans to attend graduation. He wants to present the Future Innovator Award himself. To you." I sat there, stunned silence filling the room. My parents couldn't be bothered to drive 2 hours for a holiday meal, but a tech billionaire wanted to fly across the country to give me an award? "He sent over the paperwork this morning," Dr. Eris said, sliding a thick envelope across the mahogany desk. "Congratulations, Marissa. This is the kind of break people kill for. I took the envelope. It felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. For the first time in months, the cold, hard knot in my chest loosened just a fraction. I walked out of that office into the biting January air, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt a fire starting to kindle. Spring in Pittsburgh arrived with a wet, gray thud, turning the campus into a muddy obstacle course. But inside my head, everything was bright. The mentorship with Dr. Cole was intense. We had weekly video calls where he grilled me on my methodology, not to tear me down, but to sharpen me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not just looked at, but seen for my capability. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anyone. I hoarded the victory like a dragon guarding gold, terrified that if I spoke about it, the reality would shatter. I hadn't spoken to Donna or Kirk since the "you understand" text. They hadn't reached out, presumably because Brandon was going through another crisis. Rumor had it he'd gotten a speeding ticket that resulted in a suspended license, which meant my parents were likely busy chauffeuring him around. I assumed I would graduate in peace. I assumed I would walk across that stage, shake Dr. Cole's hand, and vanish into my new life, without them ever knowing what I had achieved. But I underestimated the power of small-town gossip and the internet. 2 weeks before graduation, the university's Alumni Association posted a press release on Facebook. Tech visionary Dr. Zachary Cole to keynote commencement, will present inaugural Future Innovator Award to Senior Marissa Vance. I didn't see the post, but Kelsey did. Kelsey was Brandon's girlfriend, the reason I had spent Thanksgiving alone. Apparently, she followed the CMU page. Perhaps out of jealousy or boredom. She tagged Brandon. Brandon tagged Mom. And then, my phone rang. The screen flashed Dad. I stared at it while my lab partner, a quiet guy named Raj, looked over. "You gonna get that?" "No," I said initially. But then, a dark curiosity took over. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the tone shift. I swiped right. "Hello? Hey, kiddo." The voice was booming, jovial, the public voice my dad used when he was trying to impress neighbors at a barbecue. It wasn't the voice of the man who ignored my scholarship news. "Hi, Dad. Long time no talk. Your mother and I were just looking at the calendar, and we realized graduation is coming up fast, huh?" He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask about my classes. "It is," I said, my voice flat. "Well," he cleared his throat, a nervous, greedy sound. "We heard some news. Brandon's girl, Kelsey, she saw something online. About an award? And some investor fellow?" There it was. The hook. "Dr. Cole," I corrected. Right. The billionaire guy." "That's huge, Marissa. Really huge. We were thinking, since it's such a big day, we should probably drive in. Be there to support you." Support me. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. They didn't want to support me. They wanted to be in the room where the money was. They wanted to shake hands with a legend and tell their friends they were associated with him. "You haven't visited in 4 years," I said. "Oh, now, don't be like that," he chuckled, dismissing my pain as if it were a gnat. "We're family. We'll be there. Front row, if we can manage it. Make sure you save us seats." I didn't tell him there were no saved seats. I didn't tell him I didn't want them there. I realized, with a sudden, icy clarity, that I did want them there. I wanted them to see. I wanted them to witness what I had built without them. "Okay," I said. "Come if you want." "Great. We'll bring Brandon. He's dying to see the campus." I hung up. They were coming. They were driving into the storm I had created, completely unaware that the lightning was about to strike them. Graduation day felt less like a celebration and more like a pressure cooker waiting to blow. The weather in Pittsburgh had decided to be particularly cruel, humid, gray, and threatening rain that hung in the air like a wet wool blanket. My gown stuck to my skin as I stood in the tunnel of the stadium, waiting for the procession to begin. Around me, the energy was electric. Students were adjusting their caps, laughing, texting their parents to coordinate meetup spots. I stood alone, staring at the concrete floor. My research partner, Raj, nudged me. "You okay, Vance? You look like you're about to throw up." "I'm fine," I lied, adjusting my tassel. "Just nervous about the speech." "You're not even giving a speech," he laughed. "You just have to stand there and accept a trophy from a billionaire. Try not to trip." If only he knew. I had turned my phone off an hour ago. The last text I saw was from my mother. The parking attendants are idiots. We're walking. Where are the VIP passes? There were no VIP passes. There never were. But my parents had invented a reality where their proximity to my success, a success they had ignored for 4 years, entitled them to the red carpet treatment. As the band struck up the opening notes of Pomp and Circumstance, we began the slow march onto the field. The stadium was a sea of umbrellas and ponchos. I scanned the bleachers, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't have to look hard to find them. They were near the front, but not in seats. They were standing in the aisle, creating a bottleneck. My father, Kirk, was wearing a suit that was too tight, his face already flushed a deep, angry red. He was arguing with a student usher, gesturing wildly toward the stage. My mother, Donna, was wearing a bright floral dress that looked manic against the gray sky, craning her neck to look past the security guard. And there was Brandon. He was leaning against the railing, scrolling on his phone, looking like he would rather be anywhere else on earth. He wasn't even wearing a tie. I watched as the usher shook his head, looking terrified. My father stepped closer, invading the poor kid's personal space. People around them were starting to stare. A woman behind my mother tapped her on the shoulder, probably asking them to sit down, and my mother whipped around, snapping something that made the woman recoil. I felt a flush of hot shame crawl up my neck. They weren't here to watch me graduate. They were here to hustle. They were treating my graduation like a gate-crashing event, fighting for position before the main act arrived. I kept walking, eyes straight ahead, clutching my gown closed against the wind. I reached my seat in the third row of the graduates section. "Is that them?" Raj whispered, following my gaze. "The loud ones?" "Yeah," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "That's them." The ceremony began. The president of the university started the welcome speech, talking about resilience and the future. I didn't hear a word of it. I just watched the aisle where my parents were still standing, still arguing, still refusing to be just part of the crowd. They were a ticking time bomb. And the timer was set for the moment Dr. Cole walked onto that stage. The provost droned on about synergy and global perspectives, but the real drama was unfolding 20 yards to my left. From my seat, I had a direct line of sight to the escalating situation in the aisle. A supervisor in a headset had joined the usher. My father was no longer just invading space. He was poking a finger into the supervisor's chest. I couldn't hear the exact words over the stadium speakers, but I knew the body language. It was the stance of a man who believed the world owed him a front row seat. My mother was frantic, scanning the VIP section near the stage, clearly trying to spot where the important people sat so she could force her way in. She looked like a predator smelling blood in the water. "Marissa," Raj whispered, nudging me again. "Seriously? Is that your dad? He's going to get arrested." "I hope so," I muttered, gripping my program so hard the paper tore. Then, the music swelled. The provost stepped back, and the dean of the School of Computer Science stepped forward. The mood in the stadium shifted. A hush fell over the graduates. We knew who was coming next. "And now," the dean's voice boomed, echoing slightly off the concrete walls, "it is my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker, a pioneer in artificial intelligence, a titan of industry, and a proud alumnus of this university." At the mention of alumnus, my father's head snapped toward the stage. He stopped arguing with the security guard. He knew. "Please welcome," the dean continued, "the founder of Vector Flow and the sponsor of this year's Future Innovator Award, Dr. Zachary Cole." The applause was polite but enthusiastic, but it was drowned out instantly. "Move!" The scream tore through the air, distinct and shrill. It was my mother. I froze. Just as Dr. Cole walked onto the stage, waving to the crowd, the dam broke in the aisle. My father shoved the security supervisor hard. The man stumbled back, losing his footing on the wet concrete steps. "We're her parents!" my father bellowed, his voice carrying over the applause. "That's our daughter! We need to be down there!" They broke through the line. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. My parents, with a reluctant Brandon trailing behind them, began storming down the center aisle toward the graduates' seating area. They weren't looking for seats anymore. They were heading straight for the stage. "Marissa!" My mom screamed my name like she was calling a lost child at a grocery store. "Marissa! Wave to Dr. Cole! Tell him we're here!" I wanted to dissolve. I wanted the earth to open up and swallow the entire stadium. Every head in the graduate section turned. Professors on the dais stood up, looking alarmed. Dr. Cole stopped at the podium. He adjusted the microphone, his expression unreadable behind his glasses. He looked out at the sea of students. Then his gaze locked onto the commotion in the aisle. My father was now shoving past a row of terrified engineering students, wading toward the front like he was storming a beach. "We're family," he yelled at a campus police officer running toward him. "We deserve to be on stage too. We raised her." The audacity was so thick it was suffocating. They were going to ruin the moment. They were going to make this about them. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the humiliation to become complete. But then, Dr. Cole leaned into the microphone. "Let them come," his voice boomed across the stadium, silencing the murmurs. I opened my eyes. "Let them come down," Dr. Cole said, his voice deadly calm. "I think everyone should see this." The security guards hesitated, looking from the frantic couple in the aisle to the billionaire on the stage. In the world of high-stakes influence, Dr. Cole outranked campus police. Slowly, the officers stepped back, lowering their arms. A smug, triumphant grin broke across my father's face. He adjusted his jacket, tugged his cuffs, and motioned for my mother and Brandon to follow. They didn't walk, they strutted. They moved with the unearned confidence of people who believed the Red Sea had parted solely because they were special. The stadium was dead silent. Thousands of people watched as my family marched down the remaining steps of the aisle to the open space directly in front of the stage. My mother was actually waving little, fluttering waves to a crowd that was staring at her in horrified fascination. Brandon trailed behind, looking at his shoes, his face burning. But he didn't stop. He was too used to following their wake. They reached the barrier separating the graduates from the dais. My father looked up at Dr. Cole, shielding his eyes from the stage lights. "Dr. Cole!" my father shouted, his voice booming in the quiet stadium. "Kirk Vance, this is my wife, Donna. We're Marissa's parents. We made it." I sank lower in my chair, my fingernails digging into my palms. We made it. As if they had run the marathon. As if they had written the code. Dr. Cole looked down at them from behind the podium. His face was unreadable, a mask of calm authority. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a welcoming hand. He simply leaned into the microphone. "I see that," Dr. Cole said. His voice was amplified, crisp and clear. "Please. Stand right there. I want everyone to see exactly who you are." My parents took this as a compliment. My mother linked arms with my father and beamed, striking a pose as if they were on a red carpet. They thought the Future Innovator Award was about to become the Vance Family Achievement Award. They thought they were about to be invited up to share the glory. "Marissa," Dr. Cole said, his eyes shifting to find me in the third row. "Please, join me on stage." My legs felt like lead. I stood up. The walk to the stage was only 30 feet, but it felt like miles. I had to walk right past them. As I neared the front, my mother reached out, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was tight, possessive. "We told you we'd come," she hissed. A manic smile plastered on her face for the audience while her eyes bored into mine. "Get us up there with you." I pulled my arm away. I didn't say a word. I just kept walking, up the stairs, away from them. I reached the podium and stood next to Dr. Cole. He turned to me, and for a split second, his expression softened. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. "Trust me," it said. Then he turned back to the audience, and specifically, to my parents standing expectantly at the foot of the stage. "The Future Innovator Award," Dr. Cole began, his voice taking on a harder edge, "is designed to recognize resilience. Usually, we talk about the support systems that build a scholar. We talk about the sacrifices parents make." My father nodded vigorously, pointing to himself. "But today," Dr. Cole continued, "I want to tell a different story." The silence in Jesling Stadium was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "I met Marissa in December, Dr. Cole said, his voice echoing off the bleachers. She was standing alone by her research poster. She had been standing there for 3 hours. No one had visited her station. No one had brought her water. No one had come to take a picture." He paused, looking directly down at my parents. My mother's smile faltered slightly. She shifted her weight, glancing around nervously. She was waiting for the part where he mentioned how they had instilled a work ethic in me. "I learned something interesting about Marissa, Dr. Cole continued. She works 2 jobs. She maintains a 4 gigapascals, And she does it while paying for her own apartment, her own food, and her own utilities. A murmur went through the crowd. My father's chest deflated a little. He took a half step back from the barrier. But the story that stuck with me, Dr. Cole said, his tone dropping an octave, becoming dangerously conversational, was about Thanksgiving. My mother froze. Her hand flew to her throat. Marissa saved for 2 months to buy a turkey, Dr. Cole narrated, painting the picture for 5,000 people. She cooked a full meal. She set the table for 4. She waited. He leaned over the podium, staring directly at my mother. And then, she received a text. "We're spending Thanksgiving with Brandon's girlfriend's family, you understand." The reaction was instantaneous. A collective gasp rippled through the stadium. Students turned to look at each other. The faculty on stage exchanged horrified glances. My mother went pale. The manic flush on her cheeks drained away, leaving her looking waxen and old. My father looked like he had been slapped. He opened his mouth to say something, to defend himself, but no sound came out. "No apology," Dr. Cole recited, his voice sharp as a whip. "No explanation. Just, you understand." He straightened up, addressing the entire crowd now. "So when I hear people shouting that they deserve to be on this stage—" "Doctor," Cole said, his voice rising, "because they are family, I feel the need to clarify the definition of that word." He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was warm and heavy, a grounding force in the center of the storm. "Family shows up," Dr. Cole said. "Family doesn't leave you to eat alone. Family doesn't wait until the cameras are rolling to claim they were there all along." Brandon, to his credit, looked like he wanted to dissolve into the turf. He pulled his baseball cap down low, shielding his face. But my parents were paralyzed. They were stripped naked in front of thousands of people, their neglect, their greed, their selective loyalty all laid bare under the gray Pittsburgh sky. "This award," Dr. Cole said, turning to hand me the heavy crystal trophy, "is for the future innovator. It acknowledges that Marissa Vance built her future from scratch. She did it without a safety net. She did it without financial backing. And she did it without the people standing at the foot of this stage." He looked at them one last time, his eyes cold. "You didn't raise an innovator," he said simply. "You survived one." I took the trophy. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming release of 4 years of held breath. I looked down at my parents. My mother was crying now, ugly, shocked tears. My father looked small, but Dr. Cole wasn't finished. "And," he added, leaning back into the mic, "there is one more announcement." The silence stretched for a heartbeat, vibrating with the tension of 5,000 people holding their breath. My parents were still staring up at Dr. Cole, looking like deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. They were humiliated, yes, but they hadn't moved. They were still waiting for a loophole, a way to spin this back in their favor. Dr. Cole smiled then. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a chess master delivering checkmate. "I am pleased to announce," he said, his voice ringing with finality, "that immediately following graduation, Marissa will be joining the leadership team at Vector Flow." He paused for effect. "She has accepted a position as a junior strategist at our headquarters in San Francisco. The offer includes a full relocation package to California." He glanced down at my father, whose mouth had fallen open, "and a signing bonus of $50,000. The gasp that went through the stadium was audible. It was followed instantly by thunderous applause. My classmates were on their feet, cheering, whistling, stomping on the metal bleachers. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at my family. The transformation was instant and grotesque. The moment the words, $50,000, hung in the air, the shame evaporated from my mother's face. Her eyes widened, not with pride, but with calculation. I could practically see the gears turning in her head. San Francisco, tech money, signing bonus. My father, who seconds ago had looked small and defeated, suddenly puffed his chest out again. He actually took a step toward the stage, raising his hands as if to claim the applause for himself. "That's my girl!" he shouted, his voice cracking. He turned to the security guard who had been blocking him. "Did you hear that? That's our daughter. We're going to San Francisco." The audacity was so pure, so unadulterated, that a laugh bubbled up in my throat. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who finally sees the monster for what it is, a paper tiger. "Actually," Dr. Cole interrupted, cutting through my father's delusion like a laser. "You're not going anywhere," he signaled to the security team. This time, there was no hesitation. "Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Vance off the field," Dr. Cole said. "They are disrupting the ceremony." The security supervisor, the one my father had shoved earlier, moved in with grim satisfaction. He grabbed my father's arm. Two other guards flanked my mother and Brandon. "No! Wait!" my mother shrieked, the reality finally piercing her greed. She reached toward me, her fingers grasping at the air. "Marissa, tell them. We're your parents. You can't let them do this. We need to talk about the move." "Marissa," my father bellowed as they began to drag him backward. "We're family. You owe us." I stood on the stage, the heavy crystal award in my arms, and looked down at them. I saw Brandon, red-faced and stumbling as a guard guided him away. I saw my parents, fighting and screaming, looking less like family and more like strangers being ejected from a bar. I didn't wave. I didn't cry. I didn't look away. I watched until they were dragged through the tunnel and out of sight. The applause hadn't stopped. If anything, it had gotten louder. Dr. Cole turned to me and offered his hand. "Congratulations, Marissa," he said, and this time, his smile was genuine. "You're free." The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of colors and sounds that finally felt like they belonged to me. The rain, which had been threatening all morning, finally broke, but it wasn't a storm. It was a cleansing shower that lasted 5 minutes and left the air smelling of wet pavement and fresh grass. When the recession ended, I didn't have to look for a place to go. I was surrounded. Raj and the rest of the research team mobbed me, high-fiving me and shouting over the crowd. Professors who had barely learned my name during the semester were suddenly shaking my hand, offering congratulations on the vector flow position. I kept waiting for the crash. I kept waiting for the familiar heavy blanket of guilt to drop over my shoulders, the voice in my head that usually said, "You embarrassed them. You should have fixed it," but it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, vibrating lightness in my chest. It was the absence of weight. For 23 years, I had been carrying the emotional luggage of 3 other people, dragging it uphill while they rode in the cart. Today, the cart had tipped over, and I had simply kept walking. We moved to the reception tent, a white canvas pavilion set up on the quad. Dr. Cole was there, holding court with the dean. When he saw me, he excused himself and walked over, handing me a glass of sparkling cider. "To the future," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "To the future," I echoed. I took a sip, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. "Dr. Cole, thank you. I don't just mean for the job. I mean for the intervention." He smiled, a small, crinkling expression around his eyes. "You have a brilliant mind for systems, Marissa. You can spot a flaw in a supply chain from a mile away. But you have a blind spot when it comes to people who share your DNA. I just helped you optimize the data." I looked down at my phone. It was vibrating incessantly in my pocket. I pulled it out. 14 missed calls from Dad, 6 missed calls from Mom. Text from Brandon. "Dude, WTF. Mom is freaking out. Security kicked us out to the parking lot. Come fix this." I stared at the screen. Come fix this. The mantra of my life. I pressed the side button, turning the volume off. Then, I went to settings. Block caller, block caller, block caller. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. It felt lighter. "I blocked them," I said, looking up at Dr. Cole. "Good," he said. "You're going to need that focus in San Francisco." But as I stood there, watching the sunlight break through the clouds, a thought snagged in my mind. It was a data point that didn't fit the pattern. "Dr. Cole," I said slowly, "there's something I don't understand." "What's that?" "My parents. They don't read tech news. They don't follow the university Facebook page. And Brandon's girlfriend, Kelsey. She's not exactly the type to browse the CMU alumni newsletter." I thought back to the phone call from my dad. Brandon's girl, Kelsey. She saw something online. "The press release about the award was buried on the department website," I said, my analyst brain spinning up. "It wasn't viral. It wasn't on the main newsfeed. The odds of Kelsey stumbling upon it randomly are statistically insignificant." I looked at Dr. Cole. He was sipping his cider, looking out at the crowd with an expression of serene satisfaction. "Someone made sure they saw it," I whispered. "Someone wanted them here today." Dr. Cole didn't look surprised. He didn't look guilty. He just looked at me with that same intense mentor gaze he used when I was on the verge of a breakthrough in the lab. "An astute observation, Marissa," he said softly. "Who?" I asked. Who would care enough to bait them into coming? Doctor. Cole set his glass down on a high-top table. You're the investigator, he said. Follow the data trail. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I think you'll find this interesting. My assistant flagged it 2 weeks ago. He handed it to me. It was a printout of an email chain. I unfolded the paper, and as I read the header, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with a deafening snap. I knew who had leaked the info. And I knew exactly why. I stared at the paper in my hands. It was a printout of an email sent 2 weeks ago. The sender was Vector Flow's Public Relations Department. The recipient was kirkvance55@gmail.com. The subject line read, Confidential. VIP family access and press opportunity for Marissa Vance Award ceremony. The body of the email was a masterclass in manipulation. It didn't mention my hard work or my struggles. It mentioned photo opportunities, exclusive networking, and high-profile press coverage. It was a fishing lure, designed perfectly for the specific species of bottom feeders my parents were. I looked up at Dr. Cole. You invited them, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You didn't just know they were coming. You baited them. Dr. Cole took a sip of his cider, looking unrepentant. I did. I had my team run a background check on your support system when I decided to offer you the job. We found deficits. I knew that if you left for San Francisco without a clean break, they would drag you down. They would guilt you into sending money. They would hollow you out. He set the glass down and looked me in the eye. I couldn't have you running my strategy department while dragging an anchor, Marissa. You needed to see them for what they really are. Not parents who missed a holiday, but parasites who would crash your biggest moment for a taste of fame. I had to show you the truth. I looked back at the email. He had played them. He had appealed to their narcissism to save me from their neglect. I should have been angry. I should have felt manipulated. But all I felt was the cool, clean wash of relief. He was right. If they hadn't shown up today and displayed their greed for the world to see, I might have picked up the phone next week. I might have sent them a check from my signing bonus. I might have kept trying to buy their love. Now, the bridge wasn't just burned. It was nuked. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. 2 days later, I was on a one-way flight to San Francisco. I had spent the last 48 hours packing up my life in Squirrel Hill. I left the furniture. I left the memories. I took 2 suitcases and the crystal trophy. As the plane taxied down the runway, I pulled my phone out. I had a new number waiting for me in California, a company phone that no one in Pennsylvania had. My old phone was still buzzing with voicemails from unknown numbers, friends of my parents, probably. Or maybe Brandon trying to borrow money for bail if Dad had gotten too rowdy in the parking lot. I didn't listen to them. I popped the SIM card out of the side of the phone. It was a tiny chip, smaller than a fingernail, holding years of disappointment, missed birthdays, and desperate text messages that went unanswered. I dropped the SIM card into my empty coffee cup. The plane roared to life, pressing me back into the seat. As we lifted off, watching the gray steel city shrink beneath the clouds, I thought about the turkey I had cooked back in November. I thought about the silence of that apartment. I wasn't hungry for their approval anymore. The flight attendant walked by, offering drinks. Champagne? She asked, noticing the university hoodie I was still wearing. Celebrating something? I looked out the window at the horizon, where the sun was shining bright and unblocked by the clouds. Yes, I smiled, taking the glass. I'm celebrating my Independence Day. I took a sip. It was sweet, cold, and tasted exactly like the future. My parents had told me I would be fine on my own. It turned out to be the only honest thing they ever said to me. I was more than fine. I was free.